Story 1, The Chic Ghost of Silicon Valley. I'm Liam, and I was 33 when this happened. I've got a Halloween trick-or-treating story for you about an utterly terrifying child. No worries if you decide to run it outside of the Halloween season, though, because it takes place actually in February. So that's what made it so eerie at first, the knock on the door, then the little kid standing there in some ghost costume saying, "Trick or treat," and holding out his battered pumpkin pail. A lone kid trick-or-treating in a classic ghost costume is kind of creepy on Halloween anyway, but at least it's supposed to be. This was a Friday night in early February, 9 p.m. exactly. In that moment, I was just a bit speechless. I couldn't see what the kid looked like under his little chic ghost costume, but he was the height and build of a small 6-year-old. He sounded like a boy, and I just kind of dumbly repeated, "Trick or treat," at him, and he nodded enthusiastically and said, "Yeah," and shook his little bucket in such a very endearing way. When he shook it, I could see that he had some other candy in there, I guess, from my nearest neighbors. See, I lived in a very spread-out property near Palo Alto, California, and the houses weren't super close together, but far enough apart that a kid could feasibly walk around the small neighborhood trick-or-treating. At least that's how the kids did it on Halloween. I hadn't really dealt with one in February before, nor one lone kid this little who wasn't actually accompanied by his parents. I told him to just wait on the porch, closed the screen door, and went back inside, pulling up some Snickers minis and putting the bag inside of his bucket. The little kid thanked me extremely politely and then said, "See you tomorrow, mister." Oh, you would you? I thought. I spent the next day laughing to myself at what a clever little scam this kid had cooked up. It was a friendly neighborhood. Who was going to say no to an adorable tiny chic ghost trick-or-treating in February? It was so silly and obvious that it was almost surprising more kids don't try this. By telling me, "See you tomorrow," he'd given me fair warning to make sure I had a fresh stock of candy. I made sure to grab extra while I was at the store. It vaguely occurred to me that as a guy who lived alone in his mid-30s, giving candy to strange lone kids could probably end up being an issue. I figured as long as the kid stuck to the porch in full view of the neighbors, and since everyone in the area knew each other, it would be fine to give the kid a little bit of candy for his little scam. Besides, my girlfriend Jasmine stayed over some nights, and she was just away for the next while. I didn't expect this scam to last until she got back, so I figured there couldn't be any harm in entertaining it. But boy, was I wrong, and in ways I couldn't ever predict. Now that night at 9 p.m. on the dot, the doorbell rang and the little chic ghost kid stood there. "Trick or treat, mister." He held up that pail and shook it. He had a decent haul already, it looked like, although nowhere close to what he'd have gotten on Halloween. I laughed, nodded my approval, and dropped some candy into his bucket. He thanked me and left with another, "See you tomorrow, mister." This ritual repeated itself for the next week. By the time the following Friday came around, and the doorbell went to ring at 9 p.m. sharp, I was starting to get a little frustrated, actually. My girlfriend was set to come back into town the next day, and I had to get her from the airport, so I needed to be up at like 4 a.m. I'd somehow convinced myself this kid's candy scam would last exactly 7 days and be over by the time she got back. I hadn't mentioned the weird ghost kid in our calls. Now it felt kind of odd having to explain that a kid was trick-or-treating at our house almost every night in February. Really, I could have just explained that I expected the kid to get bored before he did, but I was looking for reasons to be annoyed that night. When I opened the door, the kid said his usual, "Trick or treat," and held up his bucket. When he shook it, I saw he had a whole bunch of candy this time. I rolled my eyes and said something about how the scam was clearly paying off, buddy. The kid made a confused, "Huh?" And against my better judgment, it caused me to snap a little. I told him it had been cute and funny to start with, but I'd give him a bunch of candy so he could at least respect my intelligence and acknowledge that it's an actual scam. I told him you don't trick or treat in February and asked him to confirm he knew it wasn't actually Halloween, right? When I asked this question, the kid lowered his bucket and then lowered his head like he was sad, and through his little ghost costume, I just heard him mutter that I wasn't supposed to ask that. A chill ran down my spine as I suddenly realized this felt like I was in some type of r/no-sleep story. God damn, if only it had been some kind of supernatural curse story, then maybe I wouldn't be dealing with the injuries I have to this day. Instead, the kid looked back up at me through his little ghost costume and began laughing in a way that was clearly tormenting and cruel. Then I heard a creak from the porch on my right. Another much older kid stepped around the side of the house and said, "You don't ask that, 'cause I said so." Before I could react, this tall, wiry teenager started punching me with some kind of brass knuckle made out of a chain. The blows were agony. I immediately fell to the ground and took a flurry of kicks. The whole time, that obnoxious ghost child I could hear laughing with glee. I'd been so blindsided by the attack that I hadn't even thought to yell or scream. Now I finally did. The teen attacking me responded by stomping on my spine, kicking me in the ribs, and leaping off the porch. I vaguely saw the little ghost kid climb onto the teenager's back like some type of piggyback ride, and they ran off into the darkness. As quick as I could, I started to drag myself to my feet and called the cops. They got there surprisingly fast for where I was and eventually accompanied me to the local hospital. I had a couple broken ribs, and my spine's never been quite right since that attack. The cops said it was the third similar report of kids doing this in the county. When we checked with my immediate neighbors, none of them had actually been visited by the ghost kid or his violent older brother. It seemed the whole thing had been targeted at my place. I was completely baffled because the kids didn't steal anything. The older one just beat me violently, and the only thing they'd really gotten out of it was just a little bit of free candy. I kept harassing the cops, saying maybe I was in danger. Eventually, a detective came to visit me and told me he wasn't strictly supposed to let me know this, but he would if it would set my mind at ease. Basically, the working theory was that it was some kind of gang initiation. The teenager who beat on me would accompany the little kid until their target challenged them on the fact that it wasn't Halloween. Then there'd be an attack, and the attacker would be initiated into said gang. From what the cops were working on, the attacker in each case had been a different guy, but the ghost kid. They thought that that was the same little kid each time. The detective told me on the download that they suspected the ghost kid was the gang leader's own son and supposedly as much of a psycho as his old man. So, this class act was getting his own little kid to lead gang initiations. I'd just been an unknowing schlub who was in the wrong place at the wrong time. I never really heard any more about it or any more reports of this kind of gang initiation, so maybe they realized it drew too much attention. I guess I've got to be thankful they settled on something a little childish and not actually fatal instead of the usual, murder a guy and you're in, kind of thing. When I think about that ghost kid laughing as I got pounded on and beaten, there's no doubt in my mind that this kid's mind was already long gone into the darkness. And I pity anyone who encounters him as he becomes an adult. Story 2, The Heat Stroke of the Arizona Desert. I've got a story for you about a time when I was a young kid myself and we encountered a strange child. I think this is genuinely the scariest thing that's ever actually happened to me. If I get sick, like a fever or anything, this is always the thing I have nightmares about. So, I figured I'd try and exorcise them by writing to you about it. This was back in the 90s, which was the best time to be a kid because it just was. This happened in like 96, and life was just simpler and more relaxed back then. This summer of 96, though. I picture it like a movie. Me and my 4 buddies, 3 other guys, 1 girl. We were just kind of the rattlers. It was me, Ethan, Devin, Ryan, and Chloe. That summer, we spent most of the time exploring our rural neighborhood in the foothills of Phoenix, Arizona, playing various made-up games in fields and the scrub desert, and just having a good time. We built a fort, we rode our bikes, we had picnics. We were all aged 8 to 10 and wanted the summer to last forever. Unfortunately, it's the last one of us almost died, that brought an end to our fun. We met the strange kid on a Monday. We knew him for 5 days. He said his name was Cody. At the time, we were finishing up our fort in the scrub, so we let Cody tag along because he asked. He seemed younger than us and said he'd just moved into the area. He had a pretty cool new bike, which at the time I didn't find suspicious. Now, when I look back on it, I think Cody probably stole that bike. Cody was a super unkempt and scruffy kid. His clothes were torn and dirty and made him look like he came from a family my sister would have called dirt poor. Cody came to hang out with us every day that week and disappeared at dinnertime like clockwork. When Devin and I mentioned Cody in front of my mom, she thought he must be part of the farming family who'd moved into the farm down the way. He wasn't, as it turns out, just some other random neighborhood kid. On Friday, Cody begged and pleaded with us to come with him and see something cool he'd found. We had plans to carve our initials into some rock formations that day, but it could wait. We let Cody lead us around the outskirts of some fields we weren't really supposed to cut through. Eventually, after crossing through an area of scrub we'd never been in and balancing our way over a small irrigation ditch, we reached the destination Cody had in mind. It was a massive abandoned mine shaft. I'd heard about the mine shaft in the area. We'd all been vaguely warned to stay away from it, but none of us actually knew where it was. Cody had led us right to it. More to the point, he was waxing poetic about how he lived down in the hole. "No, you don't," Chloe said to him. Cody insisted that yes, he did. According to him, you jumped into the shaft and it teleported you to his home, a magical place called Mesa City, where they had arcade machines on free play and it was super awesome. Then he said he'd show us as long as one of us jumped down the mine shaft. Of course, we all knew this was insane. We were way too old to believe in magical teleporters to places called Mesa City. Cody was hooting and hollering about Mesa City and demanding that we jump down in that shaft to go there with him. At first, it didn't dawn on us to ask why Cody wanted to throw ourselves down a hole, which would most certainly result in our deaths. So, we started playing along, grilling him about this Mesa City as we walked around the edges of that shaft. We stayed back, vaguely aware that there was a danger Cody might try and push one of us in. Why wouldn't he jump in, we asked. Because he was saving the teleports for us, he said. It was all just complete nonsense. Eventually, Chloe whispered to me that maybe it was dangerous and we should tell an adult. I agreed. I tried to get the others to come with us. Ethan had gotten real argumentative with Cody, though, and was trying to get him to jump down if he was so insistent. I whispered to Ethan that if Cody actually did it, we'd be in a lot of trouble. That's when Ethan finally grasped the gravity of the situation. Cody was trying to persuade us to do something extremely dangerous. We decided to leave Cody to his little hole. Unfortunately, Cody got really angry and belligerent. He tried to grab Ethan and actually drag him back towards that mine shaft. This little kid went feral, managing to drag Ethan towards the shaft. None of us wanted to rush in and get too close in case the hole started to widen. So I did the only thing I could think to do. I grabbed the nearest thing I could off the ground, a small piece of sun-bleached wood, and threw it at Cody when I had an opening. My aim was true. The wood hit Cody square in the temple and sent him reeling and staggering back, so much so that he staggered right towards the edge of the shaft itself. Thankfully, Ethan managed to grab Cody's arm and pull him forward. Cody collapsed onto the ground on the edge of the shaft, and we all crept over to see the damage. Cody seemed to be unconscious. His temple was bloody where the wood had hit him, and a little bit of blood was also coming out of the corner of his mouth. In that moment, we made a decision. This kid had been trying to potentially murder Ethan. We had no idea who he was or who his family was. On the other hand, we'd get in a whole mountain of trouble if we told anyone we'd been to that mine shaft. It was our word against Cody about what had happened. We decided to just leave him unconscious at the shaft and run away. I spent 5 years with this secret weighing on us with no idea if we'd killed Cody or if we could have saved him. 5 years of nightmares, guilt, and terror when Cody was simply not around. By then, we were all too scared to say anything. It became our secret, something we all avoided mentioning to each other. By the time high school rolled around, we were absolutely certain we'd killed a kid. After 2 years of high school, when most of us were in our junior year, the freshman class started, and Cody was among them. We found out because this kid with a mullet and a Scorpions t-shirt came up to us during lunch and was like, "Hey, aren't you the kids that I had a fight with one summer and nearly threw into a mine shaft? So, sorry about that, guys." Cody's theory was that he had heat stroke or something that day because he has no idea why he tried to persuade us to jump down the shaft. He just genuinely enjoyed hanging with us that week. That day, he says he just had this strong, severe compulsion to lead us to the hole and tell us that nonsensical story. We all just kind of laughed about it in the end and even hung out with Cody a bunch after that. It was such a strange relief. If I have fever dream nightmares, this is what I dream about, how much worse things could have been for all of us, and how stupid of us it was to just leave Cody there. Most of all, I get haunted by the story Cody told us, how, maybe because of heat stroke, he just had this strong, pressing compulsion to tell us all to jump in that hole. It makes me wonder whether if we'd walked closer to that edge, we would have felt the pull of the abyss, too. Story 3, The Witch of Salem's Lane, Part 1, The Pact. A man of many names and shifting identities. The figure later called the Chameleon Killer drifted across states and decades, quietly weaving himself into the lives of unsuspecting families. Each move left faint traces, odd disappearances, unanswered questions, and a puzzle that investigators would struggle to connect for years. Who he really was remained a mystery long after he was gone. Listen to the rest of the story over on my true crime channel, Crimson Confessions. Link down below. So, I wanted to write to you today to finally share a story that happened to me when I was a little kid back in the 1990s. It caused a big rift in my family at the time for reasons you'll soon see. It involved my single aunt, who was my dad's sister, and her daughter Skylar, my cousin. My parents weren't married when they had me. Eventually, they decided they were going to get married properly. I was a little bridesmaid to my own mom, and the whole day felt like some magic fairy tale. The only part of the memory that feels more like a nightmare is remembering my cousin Skylar, a 15-year-old goth teen, lurking on the outskirts of the wedding dressed in black and scowling at me. I remember her whispering that it physically hurt her to be inside the church and later telling me that she'd never commit to one person except for her one true lord, Satan. I was a 6-year-old princess wannabe, and I believed every word my older, and therefore obviously smarter, cousin told me. Mom and Dad had told me I had to become friends with Skylar because I was going to be staying with her and Auntie Margot near Salem, Massachusetts, while they went on their honeymoon. Skylar acted very excited and happy about it and didn't mention Satan or how being in church hurt her soul. Her dressing in black was an eccentricity. My dad said Auntie Margot had been like that when she was a kid, too, and now Auntie Margot was the nicest, sweetest person we knew, wasn't she? I agreed. Auntie Margot was lovely. The first couple of days with my aunt and cousin were normal fun days. I spent time with Auntie Margot, or with Skylar when Auntie Margot had to go out to work. It was summer vacation, but Margot sometimes worked in the evenings, and then Skylar would have to babysit me. It was on the third day staying there that I had my first overnight with Skylar. That's when she dimmed the living room lights and told me to listen real good because she had to tell me something important. She told me their house was haunted. I played along at first, but Skylar didn't think I was taking it seriously, so she tried to stress how scary and dangerous it was. When I kept giggling, she switched it up, telling me that the ghosts were working for demons, and if I didn't take this seriously, Satan would claim my soul. I reminded her she had pledged her soul to Satan at the wedding, and she called me a smartass. Then she got very serious and told me that she'd pledged her soul to Satan in order to save me because someone was planning to sacrifice me to the demons. Eventually, this started to upset me. The more upset I got, the more she continued, telling me dark horror movie things about how the demons were going to take me down to hell and slowly peel my skin off. Skylar said she pledged her own soul to Satan to protect me, and that's why she avoided churches and dressed in black. She showed me a pentagram she'd drawn on her arm in Sharpie and told me it was the Dark Lord's mark. It was all very silly, but when an older kid tries to upset you, it works. Then Skylar said it was really important that we work out who had sold my soul to Satan because the only way we could have both of our souls would be to break their pact. That night, Skylar let me stay up too late. I had nightmares and kept waking up afraid of bumps in the night. I was a really rational child, but even I was starting to wonder if there was something to Skylar's story. After all, why would she be lying? Story 4, The Witch of Salem's Lane, Part 2, The Betrayal. Over the next few days, I spent a lot of time with Auntie Margot. Skylar wasn't around much, and when she was, she and Margot kept having arguments that escalated into screaming. Whenever these would begin, Margot would send me into the other room. I heard enough to hear Skylar accusing Margot of being wicked, evil, and controlling. The next time Skylar babysat for me during one of Margot's night shifts, she told me that her mother was an evil woman and that she thought it was her who'd sold my soul to Satan. I found this very hard to believe because Margot was lovely and very kind to me. I told Skylar my skepticism, and she looked upset and said she understood because Satan's minions are very convincing. Just over a week had passed when Skylar babysat me again. This time she told me she had definitive proof that Auntie Margot had been the one to sell my soul to Satan. I had overheard Margot and Skylar arguing about me, though. Skylar had accused her of giving me a lot of attention and trying to get her claws into me, which did sound scary. That night, Skylar took us into Auntie Margot's bedroom, which is where we weren't supposed to go. It was always locked, but Skylar knew a way to pick the lock using magic, she said, though I saw her slip a key out of her pocket. Inside, she showed me the evidence. Margot had horror novels on her bookshelf, and on a board in her room, there was an old Polaroid photo of Auntie Margot, dressed as a witch, standing next to a devil who looked suspiciously like my dad in a Halloween costume. Skylar insisted this was real photographic evidence of her mother at an old coven meeting where she'd committed herself to Satan. The scary imagery on the bookshelf and the photo were enough to finally sway me. I still didn't believe any of the Satan nonsense, but I did start to believe there was an evil side to Auntie Margot. Skylar changed the angle of her story. Now it was more about stopping Auntie Margot from doing bad things to us in general and that she was secretly a wicked, abusive woman and that we had to help her purify her soul. We left the bedroom and Skylar locked it up behind her again, making me look away to save my soul while she did it. Really scary stories, every day. Subscribe, like if you like, turn on the bell so you don't miss new videos.